Welcome, friends, to the Someone Gets Me podcast. I am your host, Dianne A, and I am so delighted that you're here. This podcast was created because I believe there is a visionary leader inside each one of us who is waiting to be seen. In each episode of Someone Gets Me, you will hear useful tips from successful visionaries who will share their stories about how being seen has allowed them to take their vision out into the world with action.
Brilliant minds and better teams. Hi, friends, it's Dianne, and today we're talking about intense, neurodivergent, gifted people as part of a team at work or in other situations, volunteer, friends, whatever. But I was thinking today, as I've been doing a lot of work on my next book, about teams and about neurodivergent people. So I even wrote down some notes that I want to share with you, thinking about how we can use our brilliant minds to build better teams. Now, if you're on a team, you might want to take some of these suggestions into the team setting so that other people can have a better experience of your presence, and you can have a better experience of your presence in a team where most people in that team may or may not be gifted and may or may not be neurodivergent. So it takes a little bit sometimes of navigating. I sometimes imagine it like a slalom course if you're a water skier or snow skier, or the kayaking races I see all the time in the Olympics where they're up and down and through the gates and it gets a little turbulent, right? And I also think about it in my sailing analogies, because when we're tacking and we're maneuvering, sometimes we have to maneuver in a way that's not expected in order to get the job done. So as neurodivergent people, often we are finding ourselves navigating situations that maybe other people don't even have to put energy into how they're going to do it, but we end up having to put energy into how we're going to do it. So the first thing I want to talk about today is to remember that as a gifted person, you bring huge value to the table, whether someone else sees it or not, whether you feel appreciated or understood or not. You inherently, with all of your greatness and all of your quirkiness and all of who you are, bring great value to the table. Now, I also assert that others also bring great value. The value of an overall team, I believe, is the amount of diversity and the amount of appreciation each person has for their gifts and their nuances, so that then what happens is everyone brings that gift to the table. So if you are really intuitive, or you have an insight that has to do with the topic of a meeting that's going on, and you keep your mouth shut, you cheat you and everyone else, and whatever greatness that solution could bring, you cheat it all by keeping your mouth shut. Now, we also know that sometimes there's a lot about timing and delivery and those things. But I learned a long time ago in my life that when I keep my mouth shut, when I'm really led to say something, or I have an insight or an awareness, and I do not say anything, that I cheat me, because what I'm basically telling myself is that I'm not worthy and my ideas are rotten and all those things, and it's not true. And I cheat the audience, I cheat the other people on the team of the idea that maybe they cannot see, and that's why we're there, so we can see it and bring it to light. So remember that sometimes you're the only one who might speak up in a certain situation. Sometimes you're the only one who might be able to see a solution or connect the dots or synthesize information in a way others simply don't. So if they aren't able to synthesize or connect dots in the way you can't, but they can do something else, they have great value over here. And if you don't bring yours to the table, then there's a hole. And the whole point of having a team is to helping us navigate what we're doing. So, I really want to remind you to bring who you are to the table. Now, there's a way to do it in a way that serves you and serves other people. And there's also boundaries. So for me, I've been on teams before where I believe in bringing myself to the table. But then what I realized was they were uninterested. They didn't care about what I had to say. In fact, they were going to do what they were going to do regardless. Needless to say, I didn't stay on that team very long But what I learned how to do is use my inner boundaries and not bring all of me to the table if it's not welcome. But we first have to test the water. We first have to see how much of us the team can handle, right? And so use your inner boundaries and decide how much of you goes to the table. There are some teams that I'm currently on. I bring all of me to the table, all of my intuition, my empathy and my giftedness, my ADHD skills, all of those skills, all of my knowledge, all of my creativity to the team. There are other teams I'm on that I bring part of my gifts to the table, and the rest of them I might save for one-on-one conversations or other things, simply based on the context. So everything I'm saying has to do with that, has to do with what the context is. But the point is, when you have a brilliant mind, the teams can be made better because of your presence. And it's an art and a craft and a skill to be able to bring all of who you are forward in a way that's meaningful and purposeful and aligns with the mission of the group and the mission of the team, and of course, your mission. I hope I'm making sense, but I really think it's important to realize that we don't go blasting out everywhere, but we also don't hide. And I just had a meeting just a little while ago, a couple hours before recording this, and I was working on these things, and I had a meeting with somebody who I'd never met before. And I asked, what is your knowledge base about neurodivergence and giftedness? And that person literally looked like deer in headlights, and they went, just like that. And I'm like, okay. So what that told me was shift my language set, do a little education as I talk, and allow the person to either catch up or not with some of the ideas that I was getting ready to present that had to do with giftedness and neurodivergence. So clearly, sometimes we have to ask the person's knowledge base, look at the response, and then decide how much of us to bring to the table. So remember that in all my work that I've done a lot with intensity and intense sensitivities, because I really believe that those of us who are neurodivergent can be very intense. Some people call it high strung. I call it intense. And we also can be very empathic. We also have very strong spiritual senses where our gut knows something or we have an idea about something that may not be tangible in a linear scientific method way, but is real nonetheless. So let's talk about bringing all of those parts of us to the table in a cohesive way. Feeling your gut, understanding your intuition, empathizing with what's happening, and bringing your intellect and your logic forward. So there is this beautiful synergy, this beautiful marriage of these energies so that you can be a problem solver. You can be a person who inspires and educates others, and you can be somebody who ignites that inner fire in other people. Because often that's what we do by simply being present and sharing who we are. So all of my work that I've done on intense sensitivities that you can read about in the Someone Gets Me book or in my Where Do You Fit In book as well, will help you really understand more and more and more the value in understanding all your intensities and all your sensitivities. Because the spiritual sensitivity that you have is important in your overall experience of life. You weren't given those gifts. You weren't given that ability by accident. Now, in order to thrive in a team, you want to have people who understand leadership versus like micromanaging, right? Like it's really kind of funny because typically we don't want to be micromanaged. And typically then we probably don't want to be the micromanager of others. If we don't appreciate it, we wouldn't want to do it to another. So how do we lead without micromanaging when we're being the brilliant mind on this team, right? One of the first things to do is to be very clear with communication on what your expectations are. Whether you're the leader or the participant, you need to be very clear about your expectations. Communicate in a way that is very understandable, using language that is in alignment with the group. Like if I'm in a group of sailors, I'm not going to use a bunch of psychology terms. If I'm in a room full of other counselors and people in the mental health field, I'm going to use different language than I will if I'm with a bunch of my friends who know nothing about that industry. So each industry, each group, we all have our own language. Sometimes the words mean things very similar. but they're not always exact correlations. So we want to be very clear with our communication. We want to make sure that we are understood. So sometimes it takes asking, what did you hear me say? Right? Or did you hear that? Or did you get it? I try to find a way to say it so it doesn't sound condescending or rude, but it's also asking for clarity to make sure that the listener heard what you were saying. In fact, recently I did that with a young man I was working with, and I said, what did I just say? Because I had a sense, my sensitivity, that he wasn't really listening and he was just nodding his head to humor me, which wasn't going to work in this situation. So sure enough, he didn't know what I said because he wasn't paying attention. Now, he was a little embarrassed that I called him out, but he also learned a very valuable lesson that just going, yes, ma'am, yes, ma'am, yes, ma'am, without really paying attention isn't in his highest and best good. So there's lots of ways to use your skill in communicating to be able to get things heard, accomplished, and moving forward. We want to make sure that we're energetically aligned. Now, sometimes that's really tricky. Like energetically aligned for me is making sure that my mind, my heart, and my gut, my spirit, my soul, whatever, that all parts of me are aligned. It also means that my physical being and the presence of wherever I am is safe, feels grounded, and is secure. Like, so I can sit in my being and not like feel all anxious, right? And feel safe in the room that I'm in and with the people that I'm with. If there's not psychological safety, then I make sure I get psychological safety, including if that means leaving the room for a few moments to decide how I'm going to set a boundary, depending on the situation. But your safety is important, and being energetically aligned is also important. So if you're in a team and you're not energetically aligned with the team, then you're not going to bring 100% of all of you to the table. They won't be able to handle it, and you'll just get frustrated, and so will they. So bring the amount of you to the table, to the meeting, to the team that it can handle. Sometimes it's not our 100%, and it's okay. It's okay. The other thing I want to think about here, I want to talk about is, I knew I had to take notes because there's so many things happening. Have you ever had that where it comes through your mind so fast? If you don't write it down, you're going to forget. I know, right? It's kind of goofy, but it's true. Is you don't want to diminish who you are. You don't want to cover your authenticity. Who you are as a brilliant mind, as a sensitive empath, as a neurodivergent person, however you identify, who you are is perfect, whole, and complete, exactly as you are. All of your quirkiness, all of your humor, all of your interesting little ideas, all of the things that turn you on, the things that frustrate you, all of it makes you uniquely you. There's never been another you, and there's never going to be another you. So I really want to remind us to be authentic, to be who we really are, to learn how to use our inner boundaries to bring the right amount of us forward instead of masking, instead of covering up who we are and playing a game to try to fit in. Because sooner or later, the game ends. Sooner or later, it doesn't work anymore. Sooner or later, we end up feeling so withdrawn and inside of ourselves that things don't feel so grand. And we don't want that either. So what really matters, at least to me in this moment, is for us to understand that being authentic is really important, which means being who you really are. And so sometimes I'm on teams where I'll just say something and everybody looks at me. And then a little while later, somebody else will say, she's too smart for all of us. And I don't know whether it's a compliment or not, but I always say thank you. And it's okay. You're allowed to. You're allowed to be who you are. In fact, authenticity is rated like at the top or near the top of the most desired skills in the business world today. So it's important that you're authentic, that you're the real you. Some days you're going to be on fire and you're going to be in it and you're going to be on and your intensities are going and you've got all these ideas and there's one thing after the other, kind of like, I had to write things down for you. Versus other days where you're just in the flow and it's really great. And other days there doesn't seem like there's a whole lot coming. All of those are okay. We have the ups and downs. We live on like a sine wave, ups and downs. And it's all good. What matters is, are you being authentic? Are you being the real you? So if I'm engaging with you, I'm engaging with you with very few, if any, veils. That doesn't mean everybody gets to hear everything. There's also a boundary called the need to know boundary, where you say what they need to know. I learned that in the healthcare field, being a counselor for so many years, that you don't release information about your people that the recipient does not need to know. So sometimes we know a lot of things, but we don't need to share everything. We need to share what they need to know, whoever the they is. So it takes our discernment. And we can do that. We're all really good at it anyway. We're better at it than we realize. But being more authentic and not diminishing who you are by masking or hiding, which we're trained to do, because we live in a society that over rewards average and will reward a few great minds, but they don't pay attention to the whole package of brilliant people right around them everywhere, where there's the spiritual gifts and the emotional gifts and the amazing physical ability and the intellectual piece of it. And when you bring it all together, we're all powerhouses. And so I sometimes think that our society sometimes wants to slow that down. And I'm for the opposite. I'm for bring it on. Let's go. Let's see what we can do. Now, the other thing I wanted to talk about is being a leader without becoming so overwhelmed. Now, I know sometimes I've been really overwhelmed in my career. I've had really intense situations where I've been a leader of a team, and there's been a lot of overwhelm where there were a lot of external factors and internal factors, and it is really difficult sometimes. An overwhelm can happen to an empath. That's a spiritual sensitivity. You can go from work, feel everybody's feelings, be totally aligned, to getting finally burned out, to taking a break, and then going back around the circle again and going in circles like that. And for some people that works. It's not sustainable over a long period of time. We just don't want to be having a great life and feeling wonderful when we're on vacation after all. We want to be able to not hit the burnout stage. We can get tired here and there, but overwhelm burns us out. Overwhelm will affect an intensely sensitive, gifted person very profoundly, much more profoundly than others. In fact, I have been overwhelmed and burned out, and I have said it to other people I know who are also gifted, and they go, oh, okay. They don't have the same sensitivities I have. And that's okay too. They don't have to. They don't have to. So we want to pay attention to not being burned out. And the way we do that is we pay attention to our strengths and we set healthy boundaries around them. We set healthy boundaries around how strong we are, how awake we are, how aware we are, how emotionally stable we're feeling, all of those things, where we don't give something that's outside of our control all of the power. We know how to set limits for what we're able to do and what we're willing to do. Now, I've worked in the mental health field now for 4.5 decades, and early in my career, it's happened since then, but I'm thinking about a time early in my career where I was asked to do something that was not ethical by a manager, and I wouldn't do it. And I said no. And eventually I think they found someone else to do it or whatever. And then years later, after I resigned from there because of that kind of repeated behavior, that gentleman and some other people were arrested for fraud, which is what they were asking me to do. And I won't do it. And so we stay with our strengths. We keep the boundaries clear, right? We also understand that as a gifted person, we're often seen as the leader or the up and coming leader. Meaning, if you go into a room, I've done this so many times. I've gone into a room and go, okay, I'm not going to lead. I want to be a member of the audience, whatever it is. I just want to be in the audience. I don't want to have to teach. I don't want to have to lead. I don't want to have to be the person. I just want to be in the audience. And that lasts a very short period of time, most of the time, because what happens is our gifts kind of show up already, and then we're either invited into or thrust into some kind of leadership responsibility because of who we are, that we're gifted, even if they don't say it that way. That's why. And so now here we are in this position. So it's important that we have healthy boundaries and we really keep learning about ourselves as we grow and evolve, because our boundaries are fluid. Our understanding, our wisdom is always fluid. We're always expanding in unity, diversity, and complexity, always expanding. So we're not the same today as we were last week, and next month we're going to be different still. So it really matters that we pay attention and that we honor the fact that people invite us into leadership or we get thrusted into it. And we decide whether we want to accept the roles or not, or we want to engage in that or not. I've declined many leadership invitations. I've been thrust into leadership positions that I didn't necessarily want, and I did what I could. And then some leadership positions I really cherished and loved being in and took very seriously. So again, it's your discernment on what's important to you. And hear me when I say that because you're gifted and you're strong and you can be a leader, doesn't mean you have to be. You get to choose what's important to you and where you want to invest your energy. That's what being brilliant is. Brilliant minds have better teams because we know where our limits are. We set our expectations, our boundaries, and we're clear. Because if you have squishy boundaries, things get all messy. If you're not clear in your communication and you send mixed messages or you triangulate, even worse, right? Then you end up with a bunch of difficulties and a bunch of stress. So, as I always say, my yes means yes, my no means no. To the best of my ability, my conversation is clear. Even when somebody tries to say something different, I'm like, well, that's my memory, right? So we can have all kinds of conversations about all these things, whatever. But these are the things I was thinking about hanging out here in my office today. I was talking to one of my clients the other day about this. She's not the leader of her team, but yet everybody on the team sees her as a leader. And she didn't really understand what I meant at first, but when you think about it, it makes a lot of sense. When you enter a group of people, a team of any kind, within about 24 hours, everybody has it set up. Who's the one who's in charge really? Who's the one to go to? Who's the go-to person? I sometimes call it the default word of the business. And so because she is gifted and can synthesize things and sees data points very clear and can see the overall overarching picture of what her industry is doing and can also bring everything down to what's the next action that needs to happen. She's got a lot of unique gifts. She ends up being the leader of the others because she can help them, because she's listening to them, because she's helping them see what to do and she's leading them, and she's not the leader. So I keep telling her, you may not be the leader by title, but you are the leader of the people because they come to you. So think about the team you're on. Do they come to you, the others? Do they come to you before they go to the other, to like the leader by position? Just notice, because a leader in any group is the person people go to in a crisis, or like if something was going wrong, who would you listen to first? Who would you go to in that crisis? Because that's the person who's the real leader of the team. It doesn't mean they're challenging the other one. It just means be aware. They may be the leader by position as well, but it's not always the case. This is also for some of my people. It's really important to let other people lead. Like, see, I like to step back and let other people lead, but 40 years ago, I was loving leading, right? But now I'm a little older and a little quieter and a little wiser. And so now go ahead, lead, and I'll follow. I'll go with you, and I'll help and I'll support and I'll do everything. And I lead my business. I have things I lead, but I don't try to lead everything, right? And so it's okay to not lead. And it's also okay to let others lead. It's also okay to let others lead who are not gifted. It's also okay to let other people lead who may not be as aware or insightful or as skilled. Because sometimes the beginner's mind has great value. In fact, I think it has value all the time. Where somebody might get the opportunity to lead who maybe has never led before, or maybe never led in a certain arena. And now they have the opportunity to lead. They get to step into who they are. They get to be challenged. They get to have this opportunity. And you get to be a support of that, which is a huge compliment to you. So when other people step up to lead, allow that. Don't try to squash it because you're gifted or you might know better or you've been around longer. Sometimes the new ideas help kind of rejuvenate the things you already know. And some of those people with new ideas love to hear the wisdom of people who've been around a long time. And there's a beautiful marriage that can happen with those things when we allow it, when we see value in those things. So we want to understand that leadership is not about being in control, and it's not about controlling. In fact, the act of controlling something comes from fear. Leadership is more about influence, but mostly for me, it's about presence. So a good leader is influential and knows how to influence with mind, body, and soul and actions and everything. And they also are present, meaning when I'm speaking to that person, they're present. They're not on their phone. They're not over here. They're not being distracted. They're present. And they're present in the organization or in the team, whatever that looks like. I worked for a company where the executive director was over multiple sites. And whenever the executive director was in our site, she would hide behind a closed door and not engage with any of the people. And if there was any kind of staff issue or people trying to get clarity on a personnel policy or whatever it was, she would hide and would not address any of it. And then she would say, well, that's a center problem, or that's this, trying always to deflect. That person is not a real leader. They might have the title of director and they might in their mind think they are a leader, but they are not a leader by my definition because they were not influencing and they certainly were not present. So good leaders, like good mentors, are present. They're present mentally, they're present emotionally, they're present physically, they're engaged in what's happening. And they're engaged when they're speaking to you. And if you're the leader, you want to pay attention to being engaged and present. That's what a good leader is. It has nothing to do with controlling. It has nothing to do with micromanaging. You won't need to micromanage if your people trust you and they have psychological safety and you communicate clearly what is required and needed and important, and that you listen and you deeply listen to who they are and what they're thinking and any kind of challenges or obstacles or greatness that they have to say. That's how it works. It's an exchange of human energy and care. And when you're present on that level, the people working with you on this team will go out of their way for you. If you're micromanaging and controlling or being an absent leader or just saying things that out randomly, there will be very little respect and it will be very difficult. So if you're the leader, you want to pay attention to that. And if you've got a leader like that you're dealing with, you have some decisions to make and you have some things to look at, I think. Understand that a brilliant mind sees patterns before everyone else. So this happens to me all the time. I'm always seeing the patterns before everybody else. And then people are making fun of me. And then 3 or 4 years later, somebody else will see a similar thing and think it's a new idea. And I'm like, what do you mean? It's in this email from 3 years ago. I was ahead of the curve, right? So we see them before everyone else. So you might see the solution, the pattern, whatever it is, you connect in those dots, you'll have it like that. And it'll take other people maybe a little bit longer. And that's okay. Be aware of that. So I know when I say something and the people kind of glaze over or they look at me funny, I know it's either they'll never get it or they'll get it sooner than later. I mean, sooner or later, they'll show it. It'll come around because we see it faster. Now, if you're a leader and you got somebody who's neurodivergent and gifted on your team, you want to know what they're thinking. I had one team I was on when they realized that I was always a little bit ahead of the curve like that. Usually it's about a year. That's one of the first things they would ask me. What are you thinking about? What are you working on? What's going on in your mind about this part of our industry? Because they know that I was so forward thinking that I was a couple of years ahead of the actual play out in the industry. So to think about what I was thinking about would help them know how to position ourselves. There's a lot of value in it, but a lot of times people don't do that. They don't see the value in it, which is sad. It's really sad. So it's easy to feel out of sync with the team, and it's easy to feel kind of disheartened a little bit, or like you're not one of them because you see things differently than them. And it's kind of difficult. So I've gone through it a lot. And it's also a sign that you bring something to the table that has so much magic in it that sometimes it takes a team a minute to absorb it. So find other gifted people to talk to, right? And understand that when you're in that position, that diminishing who you are won't help. Masking won't help. Be you, be real, and go from there. And so I don't think there's a whole lot else. I don't think I put anything else on these notes. I wrote a lot of notes really fast because I keep seeing all of these things happen this way. So I think what matters the most here about having a brilliant mind on a team is that we want to communicate clearly in the language of the group. Match your language set to the group. I did a lecture one time in a rehab center I was working in, and I did this whole thing about fear, pain, and anger. And actually, I was pretty proud of myself because it was at the beginning of my career, and I'm real introverted, and I wasn't sure about this public speaking thing at the time, and it was 200 people, I think, in the room. And to me, that was huge. And so I did the whole talk, and afterwards people said, I really loved everything you had to say, and I loved your energy, but I didn't understand most of the words. And so I didn't know that at the time. I didn't realize not everybody had the same vocabulary set as I do. And so it was great that they loved it, but if they didn't understand it, could they use it? So I think it matters that we match our vocabulary to who the audience is and who's we're talking to. And that we listen deeply to what's being said and what's not being said. And that as we're part of a team, we can feel into and experience and see patterns and things that go together and synthesize information in a way that is uniquely different and extremely valuable to any team. Then we get to practice an ongoing way to bring ourselves forward with authenticity and kindness, and to stand in our authority of who we are as amazing people in the face of even people not understanding us, and in the face of people loving to listen to what we have to say. It goes both ways. So you're a brilliant mind, and you're part of a greater team. You're a part of a team in many areas of your life. And because our family is a team, our friendship groups is a team, our work colleagues is a team, whether we work for a big company and we're on a team, or whether we're entrepreneurs and we have a bunch of entrepreneur friends, or we have people working with us on our business. There are teams everywhere, formal and informal. So I want to remind you, brilliant mind out there, I want to remind you that you're beautiful and lovable and capable, and that you're magnificent, and that I see you. You have great value and great worth. You do. I hope this episode has served you. As always, you feel free to schedule a get to know you call, and I'm happy to talk to you about this or anything else. Because what I want more than anything in the world is for people to wake up every day happy, full of joy and enthusiasm to bring all of your gifts to the world. So until the next episode of Someone Gets Me, remember, keep your face to the sun so those shadows fall behind you, because you are a rock star. You're here on purpose with a mighty purpose. So go out there and let your light shine. Let that flag of your brilliance just go for it in the wind. And then make sure that you're happy. Make sure that you fill your inner yumminess, right? That's what I think of it. Yummy. Fill your inner resources with goodness. Until the next episode of Someone Gets Me, this is Dianne saying, be well.
Thank you for listening. I trust you gained some valuable inspiration and information. Please join me and other visionaries in the Someone Gets Me Facebook group. Or for more information on my services and additional episodes, visit someonegetsme.com. Again, thanks for listening.